Hey guys, Kelade here. So earlier today during Gamescom, Blizzard finally announced the launch date for the Shadowlands expansion. It is going to be on October 27th. Here's a full schedule on your screen on exactly when that's happening based on your region. So it's going to be a global launch this time. So I guess only one region is actually going to have a mainline launch. So if you're actually in NA, you're actually going to get the game on Monday on the 26th instead of the normal 27th for everybody else. So, you know, technically we're getting it one day early, but it's all going to be at the exact same time. Now, what this means is that there's only going to be 2 months left, right, before the game launches. So they're going to have to make a lot of changes because there's definitely still a lot of issues. And then the pre-patch has got to come out ahead of time, right? So, I mean, I'm going to assume the pre-patch is going to come out in a month because there's got to be at least a little bit of time, which means if you're trying to do anything on retail, if you're trying to finish off any achievements, Azeroth's champion, you know, head of the curve, cutting edge, whatever it is, don't have that much time left because this expansion is going to be over in 2 months time. And some of those, actually, I don't think you can even do when the pre-patch hits, so you have even less time. This also means for feedback, we're gonna have less time too. And most recently, as in yesterday, Blizzard made some pretty big changes to Warrior Covenants, right? Almost everything got changed except for the Condemned Venthyr Covenant. Now, Venthyr and Condemned probably still the best, which in my opinion right now, that's good. Because as long as it's gonna be basically not possible, right? You don't really want to be switching covenants. I mean, you can do it, but realistically, you shouldn't be doing it. It doesn't matter to me that if one covenant is the best, right? Because it makes it so if you pick a covenant for one playstyle, you're not completely screwed out of doing other things, right? Imagine if you picked Ancient Shockwave because you like doing Mythic Plus, but now you join a guild and you guys want to raid, and there's a single target boss fight. I mean, your Ancient Shockwave is not going to do that much. In my opinion, if there's one clear favorite and it's used in all situations, it's probably just the easiest. Now, obviously, the best situation would be if Blizzard allows us to change its abilities, kind of like talents, but we'll see what happens. So I did want to go over some of these because I know the banner, it's been changed, right? The Conquerors Banner, it's been made into a version that's better, right? So now it has a 3-minute cooldown. Now there's only one active, so it's not like before. Before there was an active, and then there was also like a secondary active, right? First you place the banner, then you can get stacks, and then you had to use the banner afterwards, which was really shitty because it took you so long to get all the stacks of glory you needed to want to plant the banner that by the time that you planted it in actual combat, all of your raid buffs are gone, right? Your recklessness is gone, loss is probably basically over at that point too. And on top of that, that cooldown, even though it was 2 minutes, it didn't start until the second activation. So even though it says a 2-minute cooldown, it's probably more like a 2 minute 30 seconds or basically a 3-minute cooldown anyways. So this increase in cooldown doesn't actually quote unquote make it like you use less or such, right? The changes to banner should only be a buff. Now, I think what everybody's getting excited about is the fact that instead of all the stuff I did before, right, it's now changed to 10% crit to you and to allies as long as you're standing within 15 yards of the banner for 20 seconds. And then instead of using Raging Blow or Mortal Strike as the way of getting stacks, it's just based on rage spend. For Fury, it's 30 rage. For Arms and Prot, it's 20 rage. Now, this basically means, when I actually use this dummy here, you're going to see, you're going to get like 7 to 10 stacks. So what that means is you're probably going to get 7 to 10% critical strike damage. Now, it looks crazy because it can go to 30, right? So if you get 30 stacks of glory, you add 30, you know, critical strike damage. I mean, that is huge, right? That's a lot of critical strike damage. That's almost like blooded enemy levels if you have some corruption on top of that. That seems good, but you do have to remember, this thing is on a 3-minute cooldown and it has to compete with all other covenants, right? Even the Venthyr Covenant, and potentially, right, you're competing against other classes and other specs, right? To be honest, I don't think this is enough. You almost need to give like 100% crit to you and to allies for this thing to even be worth it, right? Because so I'll use the banner here. I'm not even actually close enough here. Just stand over so I'm a little bit closer. I'm just gonna spend some rage and generate some rage. It's not gonna perfect, but you're gonna see that you're basically gonna be at 7 to 10 stacks. I'm gonna use that. All right, right. So we're at 10 stacks right there. And then the thing is gone, right? So we're at 10 stacks. That critical strike increased by 10. Okay. Maybe with Lust, you can use Rampage 1 or 2 more times. But I think my key point is you're not going to be able to get the 30 stacks on a single target fight. Now, if you're on Mythic, if you're doing a Mythic Plus, you're doing trash, yes, right? Especially like if you drop the banner as shit's dying and you just instantly get the glory procs, great. But key note is that this, people have to, when you drop the banner now, you have to stay within 15 yards of it to get the full effect. It's also the same with attaining glory, right? You can only attain glory while you're under the effects of the banner. In Mythic Plus, is it going to be that easy for you to constantly be within 15 yards of banner while you're moving? If you're really planning out your routes with your group, you can, but to be honest, most people are not going to be in this scenario. There is almost no way you're ever going to get the full benefit of this ability that you think you can get. So I think when you look at the value of Conquerors Banner and kind of like what it can provide, yes, be aware of the full value and just know that you're probably never going to get there. Maybe you get that one golly pull, somehow you have like super rage, and then somehow there's like all these ads that spawn in a boss fight. I think, yeah, there's like one boss fight where like all these little ads spawn. Could be on that fight you use this. But the problem right now is, can you guys pick a covenant just because it's good on one fight? You cannot. You have to pick the covenant that's good on the most amount of fights, or you pick the covenant that's the best on the last boss fight. That's all. Like those two should be the only two criteria, right? One is you find the hardest content you can do, which covenant is the best, and two, which covenant works for the most amount of content. And I can guarantee you right now, it's not this. It might look good like a buff, not good enough yet. Now, the other two that were changed is Spirit Bastion. I don't need to show you guys Spirit Bastion. It's the same shit as before. It just does way less damage. They literally just killed it. I don't know why, because Spirit Bastion was only good because it can do massive AoE damage, and it was only good on the pulls where you had it, right? They nerfed it, so even when that happens, you're not going to do as much damage anymore, and they made it have fall off damage beyond 5 targets. So it's really not worth it for that anymore, because you might as well just get knife fade, because to be honest, like especially with the fall off damage, that was the only thing that makes Spear like way better. But you might as well just go knife fade, because you're gonna get ancient aftershock. That's a little bit changed now, but it's still really good because it still does damage to 5 targets, and the key thing is all the rage that it gives you. The only thing I would say is a little bit worrisome about this one is the fact that they changed the way that it works. So instead of giving a debuff to the 5 targets, it now leaves an aftershock on the ground, kind of like earthquakes for LE shamans. Now this isn't necessarily a direct nerf or buff. It could be good in both scenarios, right? Where it gets better is in the previous version of Ancient Aftershock, where it left a debuff on the enemy. If that enemy died, you're no longer going to get the dot damage, and you're no longer going to get the rage return, right? But in this version, since it's on the ground, right? Let's say there's 7 mobs. If 2 of the mobs die over the duration of this, no big deal, because there's still going to be 5 mobs in that area that your dot is going to take on, and you're going to get the rage back. And if you hit Ancient Aftershock on 5 targets, you're getting a significant amount of returns on rage. On top of that, every 3 seconds, enemies are going to get knocked down, and knockdown does not have diminishing returns. So let's say you're doing like a Mythic Plus pack, enemies come in, you drop it, every 3 seconds, they're going to keep getting CC'd. And there's no DR, so happens over and over, right? You add that with some other CCs. I mean, those ads are CC for a long time. Similarly in PvP, right? If you play with a comp that has a lot of slows or even grips, right? If you play, you know, Warrior DK in PvP, you drop this down, right? Grip them back in, or you can even have a healer that can, you know, root them for you or vortex them. You know, you can CC them for a while here. And if you guys are kind of curious, so instead of just doing the normal effect, now it's going to do the effect and it's going to leave like this thing on the ground. It's essentially, if you guys remember Shockwave, like range and kind of area, that's what it's going to be, right? But you can see it indicated on the ground. This is what it's going to look like. All right, you want to keep ads in there, right? Just, of course, if it's a problem, let your tank know beforehand that you have this, that they should keep ads in there, because you're going to get significant damage, you get significant rage return, and of course, they're going to be CC'd. So that's kind of the covenants right now, or at least that's the changed ones. Venthyr with Condemn is still the best. I mean, it just does so much more damage. You can use it on single target, AoE cleave, PvP, PvE, it doesn't matter. That's still the go-to. The other ones, I think, in my opinion, are just too situational. There's too many cases where, yes, I can see a case where you use this for Mythic Plus, for example. I can see a case where you can potentially use Banner on certain fights where that could be really good for it, where you can actually somehow get to that, you know, godly number of 30 stacks. But Condemn just does too much damage, and it's good in too many situations. And I don't think that's a problem with Condemn. I think it's a problem with the other 3 covenants, because you're picking a covenant that you're going to use for all aspects of the game. It does feel really weird that the other 3 are all gimped in some way, that they're not good in something else. I actually think they should be more similar to Condemn and Benthir and not the other way around. And on top of that, I think even worse right now, even with Condemn, it's not insanely OP like some of the other specs are. Because if they nerf Condemn, it's gonna be really, really bad for warriors. Like, our damage, I think is good. I think warrior damage right now is similarly to where we are on BFA, right? Like, how strong you think a warrior is in BFA is basically, in my opinion, how strong they are right now in Shadowlands. Like, it's not the absolute best, but it's pretty good. Right? If you know what you're doing, you can do some good damage, but you're not going to do like far many levels of damage right now, right? So that's what I think so far. Hopefully that's some feedback for Blizzard, and then some general kind of feedback and also for you guys, like Fury versus Arms, right? Question I get like every single day when I stream. Fury is in a place where it's okay, it's enough, right? Because think about whatever class you're playing right now in BFA, right? Think about it not having corruptions, not having essences, not having azurites. That's what it feels like right now to play them in the beta, right? So think about that, and you know, if a class doesn't feel good without it, then it's gonna be shitty, like Arms, right? Let me show you guys something else in regards to the next expansion. But while I'm switching, right? So Fury, I think is in a good place where you can play it, it's fine. Arms is not. The Arms is missing so many things. There's just not enough stats, I think, right now for Arms, right? You don't have enough haste. I mean, you're going from BFA with potentially over 100% haste if you stack it like crazy, to the very, very low amounts of haste you have now. You're gonna feel super rage starved. And then for some reason, why did they make it so cleave doesn't allow you to have sweeping strikes? I think that's a horrible decision. It basically makes it so you're either gonna be able to, like, you know, do really good damage with like 2 to 3 target cleave, or you can only do multi-target cleave beyond that. And on top of that, it's such a weird number, right? Because most melee specs are probably gonna be capped around 5 to 8 target cleave anyways. So then if you're going to take the cleave ability as Arms, you're limiting yourself to just that one small segment where you can actually do some damage. So I think Arms is really messed up right now with their AoE is atrocious to play and just basically does no damage, and they just have so many rage problems. Now, the one thing I did want to show you guys on PTR is the introduction of, I think, professions everywhere. Like, almost every profession I think now is going to be used for gearing in some way. And kind of just let me show you guys, right? So obviously you have your food, right? There's this smothered shank food that periodically makes you throw up on things, and I think this is one of the dungeons I did. It's this, right? It did 3.8% of my damage and over on the dungeon. It's a pretty significant food buff. You basically just AoE everything in a small cone in front of you, right? Like that right there. Now the only problem is if you don't like the animation, as long as you have the food buff up, you're going to keep throwing up continuously. Of course, you have your general flask. So, and then of course you have your enchants and gems, right? Like all those gear stuff isn't in game still, but you're gonna get a couple of new things. You're gonna get oils that you can apply to your weapons, or you can use sharpened stones to sharpen your weapons further. Now you can use both. So I have this sharpening stone, right? Increases my attack power, or I have these 2 oils, right? Shadow Core oil, it makes me do additional damage, and it also improves my pots. And then Embalmer's oil, this makes it so, you know, when I deal damage, I can heal. At first, I thought you can only use 1 oil, but it's not the case. You can actually use the same enchants on both weapons. Right now, Lightless Force is basically, if you compare it to like BFA, it's essentially a Twilight Devastation. That's how it works out. It just sends out a wave, kind of like a sonic boom in front of you. And it works very, very similarly to Twilight Devastation. So there's going to be a lot of, once you have this and the food buff, you're going to position yourself similarly like how you do in BFA with TD, where everything's in front of you. But when you cone out, it hits everything. But yeah, so you can have Shadow Core oils. That, if you look at it, it also helps your potions do more damage. So for example, if I look at one of my combat potions, Potion of Phantom Fire, it just does damage, right? Randomly with attacks and spells. But if I'm augmented with Shadow Core oil, the additional damage is increased by 10%. Similarly to the other potion that you have, this is more of like an AoE potion. The damage and range is increased by 20% if I have the oil with this potion. So that's going to be kind of additional things. And then additionally, that's not it. They're bringing back armor kits in the game. So you're going to have to get a bunch of these too, because they last for 2 hours, right? You can put it on your chest, legs, hands, or feet, and they give you stamina. Now, obviously it's not DPS, but it's free in regards to like, it doesn't replace anything else. So you might as well be using it. So there you go. You can use that too. So there's just a couple more things that you have to worry about a little bit on your gear. And I think specifically the oils, all right, there's the buffs. You're probably just gonna have like a weak aura that tells you for both the oils and the armor kits, hey, you know, this is falling off. Make sure you reapply it. And then of course pots have a cooldown the instant you use them, and they don't, you know, reset before pot anyway. It's just a 5-minute cooldown, and you don't really have to like quote unquote pre-pot anymore. But the note is that 5-minute cooldown on your pots is insanely long. And when you guys actually get into Shadowlands and you start playing it, especially when you're doing a Mythic Plus, in rating it doesn't matter because it'll reset every fight, right? But in Mythic Plus, you'll really feel how you just don't use pots that much anymore because you don't really have an ability to, right? And you're probably going to be using pots on just trash because the AoE one does way more damage. But yeah, I just want to give you guys some ideas of kind of where we are, kind of what we're seeing on the beta right now. I'm sure I'll actually come out with more stuff because now that the expansion is so close, right? Only 2 months away, we're going to have to get a lot of our feedbacks in. On the beta, there's still a lot of things left to do, right? They just implemented some new legendaries that are kind of ants, whatever. And even just like items in the game, like this trinket, relatively new. A lot of the trinkets and weapons in dungeons don't have effects yet, where I assume at least the trinket should. So there's still a lot of things to come out on that. And then of course, we're still testing the new Mythic Plus affixes that they're gonna do. The Prideful one is very interesting because it's an affix that's similar to the one we have right now in BFA, where it's a seasonal affix where obviously there's a negative effect, but it also comes with a beneficial effect. And I think that's something that interesting that they should keep playing around with, right? So for Prideful is whenever you do, like I think it's like every 20, 40, 60% of your completion, there's an ad that's gonna spawn, right? So you did kill an additional ad, but when you kill the ad, you gain like a damage buff, you gain mana regen, you gain movement speed for a pretty long period of time, and you feel really strong when you do have it. So that actually is pretty promising. Some of the other affixes that they're testing out, not so great because they're all negative stuff, but I'll kind of update you guys on that as we get closer to the launch date. But yeah, let me know if there's any questions regarding like the current state, or you know how Fury or Arms feels on the beta, and I'll be sure to answer your questions maybe in the next video. But as always, thanks for checking out the video, guys. Feel free to subscribe to see more. Yeah.